Thanks so much, Kieran. Hey, Enterprise Techies. Welcome to the June New York Enterprise Tech Meetup Gone Global. Today marks the 8.5 year anniversary of the meetup. And one side benefit of having gone virtual is welcoming a global audience to our monthly events. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm John Lair, co-founder and general partner at Workbench. Workbench is an enterprise VC fund based here in New York City. While we invest across the country, our focus is on New York City, which represents 70% of our portfolio. Our sweet spot for investment is early go-to-market startups, and this generally corresponds to seed 2 rounds in the $3 to $6 million range. For newcomers, each month we bring together the suits and the hoodies across our network of Fortune 500 executives, enterprise startups and operators, and investors of all stages. While these days it's more like sweatpants and more sweatpants, the quality of our speakers will never relent. While we don't have demos this month, we're going to bring them back in the fall when we pick back up after a summer off. For today's meetup, I'm thrilled to welcome Ben Bernstein, co-founder and CEO of Twistlock, as our headline speaker. Ben co-founded Twistlock in 2015, scaled the company to 120 employees and 400 customers, and sold it to Palo Alto Networks for $410 million. Before we begin, a few quick reminders. First of all, the hashtag is NYETM for New York Enterprise Tech Meetup. Please tweet away and tweet often. You can view all the videos from past meetups on the Workbench YouTube page. So today's session will be on later today, and you can check out lots of the other ones we posted, so please check it out. And we will have time for audience Q&A at the end. So add your questions to the Q&A function throughout, and we'll look forward to getting to them. So with that, let's kick off our fireside chat. Ben, thanks so much for being here today. It's a typical move. We always kick off with a Workbench signature icebreaker before we get into the meat of the conversation. So question for you today is, what did you do to stay sane during COVID?
Well, as I was just telling you before we started, I finally was able to use my sous vide. I started doing sous vide cooking, was able to realize that you can make a pretty good chicken with it, and still working my steak skills with it. I'm from Israel, and our steak levels is like completely different than the US. They don't make us good steak. I thought maybe the sous vide will make it better.
Well, hopefully one day I'll get to taste it. So let's go to the earliest days of Twistlock, the genesis story to start off. It was very early days in the container ecosystem. So I'm curious, how did you have the foresight to leave Microsoft and get going building a company in the container security space?
So to be frank, first, there's obviously the official answer and the non-official. I'll start with the non-official, just to be frank, because I hate lying. So I was desperate. Like, I had like a terrible boss, and I didn't think too much. I just acted. Like, I said, oh my God, I have to leave Microsoft. I had this boss who kept telling me, like, whenever I asked him about stuff, he used to say, like, it is what it is. And I always thought, when like your boss tells you it is what it is too many times, you know, like, and then anyway, and I felt like I wanted to do something. I used to wake up at like 4 a.m. and say, like, God damn it, I need to do something with my life. This is like I don't know, like I'm almost like 40 and I need to do something. And then like I used to really wake up at 4 a.m. like, what do I need to do? And then I went to interview for Google, and I failed. They asked me like how many airplanes are in the air right now and all kind of stuff, and it didn't work. And then I kept waking and said, like, I have to do something. People used to say that I have potential, that I will do something. Like, what? It's here. I must do it. And then I quit. And before I had any idea about what we're going to do. And I often think that this is something that you must do. Like, you must commit yourself to something, and then like you have to jump, like with no parachute, and hopefully you'll figure out a parachute. And so we were completely desperate, and I didn't want to go back. I said, like, anything that will get me funded, like, because I was 14 years in Microsoft. I just said, like, anything that, like, I realized that the barrier to entry is to get money from VCs, because otherwise I won't be able to do anything. So frankly, I was desperate. I said, like, and I was able to get a little bit of friends and family money. It's a separate story, but at that point I still didn't have an idea. I had $250K, and I just said, oh my God, and no VC would give me money. Like, I was like, I always put my ego aside. I'd beg for it, like I would do anything to get like funded. And then at some point I tried one thing, I tried a different one. And I think there were two things that kind of made us realize like what we need to do. So first, like I realized that it needs to be a fundable idea. It doesn't matter if I had some really good ideas. It doesn't matter. I'm a first-time entrepreneur, and if I don't get the money, even if like I have to do something that will make sense. And actually, it's still very helpful because VCs pushing back on us on the first time was something that we wouldn't get the second time or third time, and it's helpful because they're very critical. So we realized that VCs think in the way, and that actually helped us come up with the ideas. I thought about it at the time, you know, the Gartner hype cycle. So they say that technology is like, you know, they pick up slowly, then they suddenly super cool, and then they go down, and then there's like the disillusion, and then it goes up slowly. So what I realized while I was figuring out ideas, like we were turning around ideas very fast. We'll pitch it to a VC who said, that's horrible. We'll pitch it to another VC who said, that's horrible. After the fifth VC, okay, let's change the idea. We'll come back to the same VC. Say, oh my God, I saw you here a few weeks ago. I forgot about it. We have a new thing. So it was, anyway, so I realized that every time we pitched an idea that was basically, the worst, there were two mistakes that we were making. One is like, I don't know, we were talking about DLP, data leakage prevention. So we thought data leakage prevention, well, it's already down and only 1 in 6 projects succeed. So we'll put AI into it and we'll make it more successful. And I showed that, you know, there's so much money to be made, but no VC was interested because they were already kind of like, I realized that they want something that's like peaking.
Did you think that you could build that, or it was more so, let me think of an idea and then I'll figure out how to build it?
Oh, absolutely. The later. I mean, like, I just like, because I realized if I don't get the money, I can't build anything. So, and then I thought like, okay, so, you know, everyone's doing like cloud security. That's a hot thing. Every time I said cloud security, people kind of said, okay, that's interesting. So, okay. And then there was like this CASB thing. So we pivoted DLP and we said, DLP was CASB. CASB is like, you know, security for Salesforce, security for Office 365. So we said, we'll focus on the DLP aspect. We'll add AI, like we said, every buzzword in the, like whatever. And then people said, wow, that makes sense. Now it makes sense. Now it makes sense. No one gave us money. So at that point, I realized I cannot pitch something that's already at the peak. Because if I pitch something that's the peak, everyone agrees with me. You think you got it, but no one will, like, there's already big companies out there.
They won't fund it. Yeah,
Sky High Networks, I don't know, Netscope, whoever, like, and you say, no, but I'm smarter than them. I say, yeah, sure you are. And like, and it's, okay. So I realized, like, VCs will only give me money if I'll give them something that will be very innovative in like 6 months. And then I was pretty lucky because I was in security. Like the only thing people buy from Israel is guns, I guess, and security, and that's it. So the only option to actually do something is security, cyber security in Israel. So that and ways, I guess. Which, so I thought, you know what, we'll do security. And the good thing about security is that if you add the word security, it kind of gives you a 6 months buffer. So we can try it. Like you say IoT, I'll say security. And so like IoT is hot, 6 months later, IoT security is good. Drone security. Well, it didn't work, but still, you add security, you get money for it because it's like up and coming. So I told Dima, the other co-founder, let's find something that's up and coming. And then like we sat at this place in Israel, like a noodles place called Giraffe in Herzliya. And we were pretty desperate. We had one developer with the money I got from the friend and family. We never invited him over to lunch because he was very depressed because he realized he lost his career in Microsoft coming over and we have no idea. Yeah, he said like, I remember the second day, he said, oh my God, what did I do? Oh, Ben, tell me you have something. And I said like, we don't. And then anyway, so we didn't bring him to lunch. And I was telling Dima like, we have to think about something. And he told me like, you know, I read about this thing called containers in Hacker News. So what is it? He said, well, it's like VMs, but it's like lightweight VMs. Like, so what do you want to do? Like security for that? He said, yes. So, well, there's already security for VMs. They're like, Dima, this is a great example of a very stupid idea. This will never work. Like, and we also need like a business case. What you just described is like a very techy idea. It's not going to work. Tell me when Gartner is going to write something about containers, I'm willing to look into that. And Dima is Russian, like a, you know, strong, silent type. We just walked back together, and I was explaining to him with my hands that he's stupid, and we walked back to the office. We sat down, and he sent me this link to this Gartner thing that had Docker in it or something. Mm-hmm. And this was like, I don't know, February 2015. So, okay, I'll look into it. And then there's two insights that I got. First, I talked to a VC that wasn't raising a fund. So I thought at the time, like, she's going to be honest with me. And I told her, look, I can do the DLP thing, which will make money. It's really an amazing idea. I can do this buzzword, like take containers and security. What do you think I should do? So of course, container security. So I told her, like, are you dumb? Like, I just told you, this is a real thing. And the container security is like, wow, Fugazi. I don't know how he's saying the wolf, wolf of Wall Street. So it doesn't exist. And he said, of course, I think that's the right thing to do. I said, like, are you stupid? He said, no, you'll figure out it's not that I'm stupid. Like, everyone's stupid. Customers stupid. Like, all the world is stupid. Everyone's interested in what's up and coming, not what's not. And then I realized it. Now, the second insight that I really got, and this one would be shorter, is when I joined Microsoft, we used to run, I was like a kernel developer, and we were running stuff, and we're debugging stuff, and they were running, some of them, the idea of a virtual machine just came up. So they told me, like, real people do not debug VMs. We only debug real hardware. VMs is like for developers, it's not real. You don't run stuff on production on VMs. Fast forward a few years later, you tell like people, oh, you can run infrastructure as a service in the cloud. So no, that's not for production. That's for, this is for developers playing around. And then and then when people tell you, oh, there's this thing called Docker, but it's just for developers and testing. So generally speaking, but I guess that pattern is already kind of pretty much used, but generally speaking, anything that has to do with developers are, I don't know, they're smarter than other people, generally speaking. If you see them put their effort somewhere, it's a good place to look. And that's why Dima was actually looking in Hacker News. So that's a very long answer to how we got to this thing.
I love that version, though, instead of the corporate answer. A lot of good nuggets there. So then let's take this idea of container security. And as you said, 2015, even 2016, it was such early days. There were competing standards. You had Docker trying to do the container image, but then also orchestration. You had CoreOS, and then they had done Rocket. They were doing, you had Mesosphere before they rebranded, right? How did you even approach building a product when the adoption was so low at corporations, and there was just so much confusion around standards?
Well, first, the only way to do it is trial and error. Like you try something, doesn't work, you try again, and you have to, like, there's so much noise. You have to have a lot of intellectual integrity, because you hear all these things, and they're just like, you have to focus, sit in a room and say, like, okay, what's reality? So reality at that point was like people running Docker. People are running Docker. And then we did something about access control, and we talked to this hedge fund in New York on the way. Like I was trying to figure out who's using Docker, right? So and I wanted to just talk to them. But so I looked at wanted ads where people were looking for people with Docker skills. Okay, so I saw that hedge fund was doing it. So I said, like, hey, I looked for an Israeli guy, and then they told him, like, oh, brother, can you help me? So how do you know that we have Docker? So, well, you had this ad. Okay, let me connect it to the IT. Yeah, I talked to them, and then they said, you know what, we need access control. So we built this access control, and frankly, no one needed it. And then I moved to the, San Francisco. I personally hate San Francisco, but I moved there because, not necessarily San Francisco, the whole Bay Area, the West Coast in general, I hate. But I had to move because everything sort of happens there. Excuse me for all the people on the West Coast. Because I'm Israeli, it's like East is like, I'm more
You
like
love New York, that's all that matters to us.
Yeah, I love New York, and we're like, it's too sophisticated for me, the West Coast. So anyway, I moved there, and everything was there. So I started figuring out whether I know someone from Docker, because Docker was like, the thing back at that point. And then I was somehow able to get to Nathan McCauley. He's like the guy that was running security there. And he was nice enough to meet with me like almost every few weeks. And I told him, like, look, just tell me what you don't get to. If you don't get to something, let us help you. Like, you'll build an ecosystem. And I have to be frank, he was really nice with us, because like sometimes startups at the phase that Docker was at, it's not very happy of cooperating. Say, I'll do this, and I'll do this, and I'll do this, and that also. Again, I'll name names, but GitLab, for example. So, they're a private company, and if you look at what they do everything. So, so they're at the point where if they'll talk to anything in the ecosystem, they'll say, well, you can do it, but we'll do it better than you, and we're already after. So Docker, maybe they were doing it for some, but I don't know. Nathan was nice enough. And at some point he said, you know what, we're doing a competition and who's going to do vulnerability assessment the best way. And then we had a guy develop it, and I don't know, we had a really good, 10x programmer. In 2 weeks, he built something that got second place in that internal tournament they did. Luckily, it got second place, because otherwise they would have tried to buy us at the time or something, I don't know, or get like a big deal with us.
For sure.
But it was, yeah. But anyway, it was good. And then we pivoted. We started doing vulnerability and talking about, intellectual integrity. We realized initially I had all these amazing explanation why we're not doing vulnerability, because it's a different, like all these conception, the thing, you can always change them after a good night's sleep, but the reality is harder to change by just sleeping on it. So the reality was that people were looking at vulnerability, and there was this company called Banyan Ops that honestly were already doing it. And then we said, you know what, like we'll try and do it too. And we did it, and we did it well. And so I didn't have any problem. Like I had no, the only thing that always mattered for us, like we had a North Star, and it's not good to say, but since you're a New Yorker, hopefully we just wanted to make shitload of money. That's all we wanted. We didn't want to change the word. We didn't want like change security. Like we just want to make, and it helped us like focus throughout. Maybe we'll talk about go to market, about like, we're not trying to do the right thing. We're just trying to be successful.
Let's segue off that then. So you find this wedge in the vulnerability assessment, and that's what people actually start needing versus the access control protections. Who did you actually go to market with? Was it your fellow startups in the West Coast? Did you start flying back to New York and target the banks? Who were those early adopters?
So one thing about the product, to be frank, for completeness, we did start developing also runtime in a strategic manner. We realized that vulnerability would not be enough, because we realized that we will need to create a complete suite. I don't know why. I can backtrack it and talk a little bit about it.
How early did you do that though? Because if you're selling customers, you're a small team, right? You need to service the existing ones. What % of engineering resources were on that future-facing R&D versus the core sellable platform?
At least 50%, but I was always moving stuff from I call it 0 to 1 and 1 to infinity. So there were a lot of things where we signaled, like we had runtime security that looked at the processes. It wasn't amazing. It had a lot of false positives, but we moved it from 0 to 1 and we planted it. And this way, once a customer was complaining, hey, I have false positives, okay, there's 5 customers that actually use it out of our 6. We should really start looking into that more. And then we had this thing that integrated with Intel CPU that was supposed to whatever. No one ever used it. So like we moved from 0 to 1. At some point we kind of deprecated, but you have to do a lot of these 0 to 1s, because otherwise I'm not smart enough. I cannot sit in a room and just imagine how reality would be. We had some competitors, on the other hand, that were in stealth mode for 2 years, building like a fancy AI stuff, much smarter than us. Like the guy that started it was, like he has a BA from Harvard and a PhD from Stanford. And if I had a daughter, I would ask, I do have, but she's too young. I would say like, you should marry, like, and he's a personal friend of Obama and all that. And they built this amazing thing, but they didn't, for like 2.5 years, they didn't look at customers. And we always said like, we're public school guys, we're kind of dumb. We need to talk to customers. So we moved these things. And even if it cost, like 50% of our people were actually working on these things. So
who were those early customers, the 5 of the 6 or whatnot? Was it tech companies? Was it a mix with some big Fortune 500?
So first of all, there were early adopters and early customers. It's kind of interesting to, like the hedge fund in New York, like they were talking and talking and talking. And I remember after 2.5 years, I told them like, you're not going to buy. Yeah, we're actually not going to buy. We just like messing around with startups. I kind of felt bad.
Did you get to use them as like a design partner and flex that you're working with the big FinServe to help with other customers, or not really?
Because like you have to be like, integrity was very important for us. Like we had very thin layer of bullshit. Like we tried not to bullshit ever, especially ourselves. So we knew they're not a customer. What actually really helped us was that, frankly, if you wrote Docker security for 1.5 years, there was nothing else, like just Twistlock. And that actually helped us. Like the most important thing in a startup is that no one's buying anything. No one's like, you're not selling anything. People are buying it. So, I mean, like if you're selling something that people want to buy, they'll figure it out. Like one of our earliest the second customer was a DoD customer, and we're like a bunch of Israelis. Like I had to bring out I don't know, there's this NATO, I had to bring out my something and call NATO and find like, it was like the whole thing. And they somehow figure out a way to buy it just because they needed it. I'm pretty sure that if I had like a US competitor at the time or like something that would solve their problem, they would have used it. But a lot of customers found a way, well, are you using like this list or that list or which resellers? Because we only, like I don't do any of it, but I have to suffer. Do you want to buy it? And then, well, okay, we'll figure out, we'll call this guy, and they figure it out.
Question on that then. So you said before many of your competitors were stealthy. So when people Google, you were the first result. How did you handle the inflow of all the requests and frankly disqualify, I'm sure, a lot of people that weren't a fit and weren't ready to buy? Did that end up being a big focus, or you just
Only
handled
after,
everyone
like,
that inbounded?
Everyone that inbounded. At some point I got sales team, but like I couldn't afford disqualifying people up until I think September 2016, when I actually started architecting a real go-to-market strategy. So up until at September, we had a salesperson and they weren't very effective, like very early on. And I realized they're just working with an Excel. They hide the details. They're doing all kind of stuff. I just let them go. And I hired like a guy who was just almost like a sales architect. Like he did exactly like the textbook go-to-market, and he had like this 5 signs that he did it himself initially. He called every customer. He said like, Ben, first I want to know why they bought it. I'll tell you why they bought it. So I don't want to hear it from you. I want to hear it from them. I don't believe the word you're saying. And he called each of them. And then he found like, okay, here's our 5 signs that I want a customer to have like 3 or 4 of or something like that in order for them to qualify. And he started qualifying them and do the more classical go-to-market.
A lot of people on the line right now are early stage companies, seed, Series A, maybe even B, and they may not even have sales teams or very early days. So back to the earlier go-to-market days, everyone's Googling you and finding you. Would you get on the phone with them? And how did you avoid the hedge funds that would basically mess around for 2 years but not necessarily buy? Like, was there something that you developed where you just could get a sense of, hey, if they say X, Y, and Z, I know they're real? Or
no, I mean, you saw there, like we were just trying to, initially we started the first 6 months, we just want anyone to use it. Like we didn't even ask for money. After 6 months, me and John, who was our CTO, and we had an amazing CTO who joined pretty early on. And a CTO is kind of like, if it was a deck of cards, it's like the Joker, it could do anything. But this CTO guy was actually a product, like basically head of product and also a customer facing CTO.
Yep.
And the first customer, like the second customer was the DoD. The first customer was a big chain of hospitals, a pretty big one. And we went to see them, and he said, you know what, Ben, I think like, let's try and do the pricing now. So I put in towards the end of the presentation that talks about what we do, suddenly like we put in a slide of pricing, and he said, look, let's see if they react, like if they keep asking questions after the slide of the pricing, means like we got it right. If they don't, that means like we got it wrong. And it was funny, we wanted to charge like, initially we did all these exercises internally, and we figured out like it's gonna be $150 per host, $150 per year per host. And then like, because this and that and endpoint security, because we invented this space, there was like no pricing, nothing. Yeah. So we had to come up with everything. We said, 150. And then John said, nah, that's too cheap. So we added a 0 just before we started. And since then, like the price line in the entire industry is $1,500. But he added that 0 because he said, that's too cheap. So it was kind of funny. But we showed them the pricing, and then they kept asking. Did you stick
with per host as you grew? So it was just add the 0 and then you were good to go.
Yeah, it was, we were kind of lucky, I think. But the host thing had actually 2 important things in it. One is that it enabled small deployments to not cost too much, and it enabled big deployments to like, if someone's like, I don't know, a big bank is thinking about 3 years in advance, then we can charge him a lot. Even if like some of them want to pay you a lot, like, you have to assess, like part of the sales cycle is like, there's always this play where like, can you just tell me your budget and I'll I'll just build everything for it. Sometimes they do. So you're trying to assess, and this actually gives you like, okay, here's a story. You have a big budget. Well, you probably have a big deployment. We're going to help you, blah, blah, blah. So that enables you to do that, but also get like a DevOps person. And it'll be interesting. I can tell you who we sold to, which would be probably the interesting piece here. But anyway, sometimes you go through the DevOps. Sometimes you didn't reach out to the security guy, but you want to hook him in. And he's only have like $3,000, I don't know, I guess $10,000 a year, and you're somehow able to hook him. So it gave us a little bit of that flexibility. The second part was that containers were kind of this fluid thing that could go up, could go down, sideways, whatever. So it doesn't really, it's hard to predict. And if you give someone a price and you tell him like whatever it is, he thinks it's going to be 3,000, and then he uses too much and it happens to be $1 million, and you somehow make him pay that $1 million, it will be the last $1 million you'll ever see from him, his friends, or his family. So it needs to be predictable, right? So host is something predictable because people typically know how many hosts they have, even if they're in the cloud. And if they decide to take more hosts, they typically pay more, and they can plan it in advance. So per host made a lot of sense.
And walk through then some of the buyers. You said there was security, there was DevOps, because it was a new category. How many different stakeholders were involved in the decision?
So we were desperate, like I told you, and we needed to have customers. And we got some inbound interest. Now, our thesis was this. People are building new infrastructure. Like, we saw a customer, we asked them, like, what do you do? I'm building an app for whatever. So it's like a green field. And we realized that this is the real bet that we've taken, that people will ask for compliance. Like, you can sell security in two ways. You can scare people, tell them, like, oh, there's like a scary virus, it's going to eat you. And then like the other part is just telling like, look, there's like a bunch of people with suits coming in. They're going to ask you like whether it's compliant, and you need an answer. So we went on number 2 here. But we had a very large definition of it. It needs to have runtime element. It had to the vulnerabilities. Like we had the option to build like a full stack and full life cycle here, and we did. We tried to hit every area, which was very challenging. It was funny because initially raising out, people tell me like, do you do vulnerability or runtime? Say you're doing both. So no, pick one. So I can't pick one. So that was like the A round. In the C round, you're saying like, I'm doing everything great. You were looking for you guys. So it was like easier to raise money later. But so the guy that really cared about compliance, our bet was that it'll be the DevOps person, but he doesn't really care about security that much. He just, like, someone told him that, look, here are our security stuff. We bought all these appliances, and you have to hook them up into whatever you built to make it compliant. And he doesn't want to do that because it's impossible for him. We'll give him something he likes. He can't pay for it. He called in the security guys. We're Israelis, so we know about guns and all that stuff. So when the security team comes in, they'll probably have a mutual friend, or they'll ask us questions, and we'll be able to answer them. And then they'll take pay us.
Did they have the budget, or was it kind of greenfield budget as well, or did they take it from somewhere else? How did that work?
So mostly it was the security team. Where in a company where there's a security budget, it came from the security budget. There were more modern companies, that grew up very fast, and the CTO was sort of in charge of all the aspect. But whenever there's a different silo of security, it's always coming from security. Because at the end of the day, like, developers, they don't have any incentive to have their stuff compliant. They just want to go to market as soon as possible. When the security team came in, we told them, like, you're getting us, but we're actually helping you be the good guys. You typically were the people who they complain about. If you buy our stuff, they like you. You're not, and we're helping you because it's automated. The DevOps team will send the tickets automatically to the developers. You don't have to run after every issue, blah, 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 blah. They kind of liked it, and they paid for it. So that was typically the thing. But we had a couple of competitors that actually went the other way around. And now I'm in Palo Alto Network, which also roughly going, like, at a high level, they're selling to the CISO. They already have some kind of connection to the CISO. They can sell top down in an organization. We couldn't do it. Like, I had no friends who were a CISO. I didn't do anything. I had a crappy boss in Microsoft. That's what I started with. So, I mean, like, so we use these sort of like, later we realized it's kind of fancy word of like inbound marketing and, doing all that stuff. But that's what we did in practice. The sales team was an inside sales team. We kind of there's just two ways to sell B2B. One is like inside sale, and the other one is like outside sale, or whatever the opposite is. And we use the inside, which there's a lot of benefits for a young startup in doing inside sales, because a lot of the ones that start the other way around, they have to turn around the entire team, like fire them and hire them like after 1 year when they realize it doesn't work and they need to set up everything from the beginning. When you have an inside sale and you get like a really strong sales leader that sits in the office, listens to everyone, knows exactly what product he's selling, builds the sales force with these fields, tell people like this, and this, and is what you're looking for. One person listens to the other. We built this whole thing in Portland, but it was like a sort of a mecca, like a place where everyone knew what they were selling. Everyone was sitting in the office. There were insights moving from one person to another. And when we started doing the field sales, we got the field sales people spend a couple of weeks in the office. And then we had some sales development representatives with them in the calls to make sure they put everything in Salesforce, that they don't think they're like the sales hero, like it was very inside sales driven. We might have lost some opportunities in like banks and places where there was a lot of like, hey, schmoozing and playing golf and stuff like that. But generally speaking, we actually, even in big banks, we got more big wins than competitors who tried to do it top down. Generally speaking, I think at this point in Palo Alto, I think we officially said we have 50% of the Fortune 100. When we were bought, we had like 35% of the Fortune 100. As a startup, we got 35% of the Fortune 100. It was like nice, like especially if coming from Israel.
That's amazing. Yeah. I want to leave some time for questions. So people in the audience, feel free to use that Q&A tool. But while they're typing that in, what are one or two lessons that you can share with fellow founders that were some of the challenges as you scaled and you overcame that we haven't touched on yet?
Yeah. Well, first of all, there's a phase in the startup which I think we overcame, or personally as a CEO overcame pretty well, and that's where you have to understand that you are not going to get involved in most things. You have to hire really good people, because there's a tendency to say, you know what, like we're going to get this okay person, and the people you hire in the beginning are just going to make or break your entire company. There's no, you cannot say, well, we got this guy, he doesn't look the right guy. Like you're going to be very sorry for each person who's not the right person. You have to let go people really quickly. Like I had a salesperson that I let go like in 2.5 months. We like that doesn't work. Like we get another person. You have to be very very quick in the way you do things. Yep. And then you can actually build a team that scales. And you need to let go. You need, like, I had the head of sales. I told him, you know what, I work for you. You tell me what you need. Same goes with the product guy. I told him, gave him some guidance, but you have to let go. So, I mean, that actually helps you scale. And obviously, specifically with sales, I was lucky to have a sales guy that is like a sales architect. He's like the smartest. Like we had a board member who was in Datadog in our board, and he just said like, gosh, this is like a Datadog level head of sales. Like he's a really good guy. And he was like, Salesforce hygiene is like so important, because if you don't have the sales team put the right things in, including, you know, what actually happened with the customer, you cannot, like, after you pass 20 customers, you cannot, like, you just lose control. So when you get, like, you know, 400 customers, you need to look for trends, you need to do stuff, and it's much faster than you think. And if you didn't put it in a correct way in Salesforce, you might actually need to fire your entire Salesforce, because, like, they're not even used to do it, and you have to scrape everything. So that's very, very important. Also, one last thing about the marketing, there's like two types of marketing people. We were in category creation mode, and so it was very hard to get like a product marketing person, because no one knew the space. So ever you talk to someone, he said, oh, I love what you're doing, but he didn't have an idea what the space is about, because I didn't have an idea what the space is about. Why would he know? I was always looking for someone who might lead me, but there was no one, because I was apparently leading it. So we got like the more digital, you know, demand gen, digital, that kind of person who's like very mathematical. Also a little bit like our head of sales. They're like, you know, they're engineers. They're thinking about, I'm going to use this cost per click. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this, which whatever.
Just to be systematic about pipe.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're starting to get the questions flowing in. One other comment, by the way, instead of a question, someone wrote, no other questions, but Ben has just become my favorite CEO in security. So I think everyone appreciates you keeping it real. So let's answer a question here from Rachel Craig. Will you tell us about your first 3 to 5 sales hires? How did you choose them? What did you look for? And how many did you have to fire and replace as you scaled?
So we had one head of sales, and the, I, I don't want to say, bad things. But what I found out is that they just don't scale, and it's very easy to sort of smell that. Like they're working with an Excel sheet. They don't have any systematic way of approaching the problem. It's like, hey, you know what? I know this guy, and he knows that guy, and like he sounds like, they sound like very connected. They have this little black book. That's not going to work. You know that little black book's not going to scale. So I realized that I'm not a lucky guy. I never was a lucky guy. So we need to, like, it might take a few years, and if we stay with that person, it's not going to work. And then, frankly, I was lucky. So I was working in Microsoft, and I had this guy, and he was like the most impressive sales guy I worked with in Microsoft, and he never spoke a word. He would always talk like, he would always be quiet. And I don't know why, like he's quiet and he's charismatic, and you don't get it. I didn't get it. I still don't. And he's like that's the guy that Matt from our board said, he's like, wow, he's so impressive. And like, he speaks very little, and he's so smart, and like the opposite of what you think of a salesperson. And I knew him from Microsoft, and he was working at Puppet at the time. And Puppet had a change of CEO. And I just raised my A round. And I said, like, oh my God, please, please. And it was like so painful to raise the A round. You don't like, that's like an hour and a half, just the horror stories of like every VC in the world telling me no in the most humiliating ways. But going to Brian, like I remember we raised the A round, and then I said, you know what, maybe the number 2 guys in Puppet for sales will be willing to come to us. And he knew me and John, our CTO, and he said, I'll do it. And I remember I called Dima, the other co-founder, and said, I mean, that's better than the A-round. Like, we got him. He was amazing. He was so good. And like I told, like the first thing he did is call the customer. He was you just see that he knows what he's doing. And honestly, I just told him, like, here's like, I work for you from now on. Like I always, until we were acquired, whenever VC, anyone from the company tell me what you do, I say, I work for Brian. Like basically, that's what I do. I'll do anything, because we realize there's so many noise and stuff. We only need to do one thing. We just need to sell the shit out of the product. That's all. We need to build a product that people want to buy, and we need to help the sales guy, and then every argument, anything me and Dima, the other co-founder, our first argument ever was after we got acquired, because we realized that now it's not very clear what our goal is. But when we were in Twistlock, we never had an argument. It was very clear. We never had like anything like that. So I didn't need to let go almost any salesperson. This guy was like the Pied Piper. Like when he left, like people started figuring out, people that worked with him in the past, like they just all followed him. It's just like an amazing salesman. Brian Lake, his name is, if you ever run across him.
Wow, that's amazing. We're getting a couple questions around the timing and considerations to sell your company. What were some of the important considerations that you thought through?
Honestly, again, I'll be like, I could be like, oh, I felt, but it wasn't like that. So like frankly, like me and Dima always had like a handshake agreement that, and I'll be like very blunt. We said like, if we can make $5 million net, each of us, like we sell the shit out of it. Like we don't care any, like we'll just sell it. We'll just be rich. Like it was funny. I was pitching Benchmark with Peter Fenton actually, and he asked me like, hey, what's the like motivations for Twistlock? So I said like, I always wanted to be like an old man that tells stories to people. I like telling stories and stuff.
You're
and
good at telling stories.
Thank you. So I said, I want adventures. I like, my life has become so boring, and now with the startup, I see all this stuff and I love it. And Dima he said like he's too tired of being poor, basically. That's what he said. And then like, so Dima said like, $5 million, I don't care about your stories. Like I want $5 million and that's it. So we realized that when an offer like that will come, we'll sell it. But what actually happened was, that there's a point in which you cannot sell the company, because if I would bring it to the board, they will fire me and get a different, like, because they want the multiplier for their money, even like a decent multiplier. So at some point, like, you just say, okay, fine. When I'll get a good offer, I'll use it. And then for like, frankly, like for 5 years, 4 years, we always got after every round, you'd get a an offer or two, or like a hint of an offer that you would have loved to take the previous round, but this round I just can't. And we got
Yeah.
it from all kind of companies. Like we had, I got a, anyway, I probably can't, but I got like an offer from companies that wouldn't want me in other circumstances. And you're just like saying like, oh my God, like I would have loved to work there. Like they have ice cream. I want a refrigerator with ice creams. I always wanted it. But then I couldn't take it. And frankly, that was the first offer that actually made sense. And it was actually a pretty, like between us, this is kind of the interesting piece, but I'll be frank. Like I came in, we had an amazing company, really, like everything worked. So I came in and I knew that our competitor, like their valuation was higher significantly than us. We had more customers, like we kept the valuation low, not because that was like a smart thing. I was not good at raising money, apparently. So like my valuation was low. So I came in to talk to the Nikesh, and I knew that doesn't matter what he'll put air out of his mouth and I'll put air out of mine. But it's like both of us will look at the reality. Again, it's about integrity. We're a relatively cheap company with, and we have we have probably 3 times more customers than our next competitor. And we're, we have a lot of stuff to offer. So if he doesn't want to pay up, so we won't. So I actually came in, I had a number in my head. Obviously I didn't tell him the number. We got a little bit higher than what I had coming in. And it was like, and he was very rough in the negotiation. He kind of said like, we'll destroy you. Like, he's actually kind of funny, Nikesh. Like when I met him, it was funny because he was, I remember he said, Ben, I already got one of your salespeople. And I said like, oh, you did? I already got one of your salespeople. He says, oh, great. And I'm actually happy to hear that because I got a good salesperson. You got a crappy one. And he had some other, there was another thing. He said like, Ben, you need to be part of our suite. We have a suite because what you're selling doesn't make sense. Like on principle. I said like, Nikesh, I'm too poor to have principles. When I'll be rich, I can buy principles, but I don't. They will make you rich if you take the offer. But anyway, it was kind of a nice negotiation. But what really helped me was that I felt like we had a good thing going, and it was fun to do the negotiation. I have like lots of stories about it, but we never intended to even sell it. Like they reached out to us. We always kept making like a list of who might potentially buy us, and we tried to keep in touch, like. To know who's in the big companies might be the acquire, and then like kind of ping them like with stupid, I just wanted to keep you in the loop that we whatever, so they'll have us in the mailbox. But we actually didn't even think Palo Alto would ever buy us because we tried to do like the math. No, like we're already out of that part. Like we need to talk to Cisco now, we need to talk to VMware, we need to talk to Oracle, whatever these. But we didn't even realize that Palo Alto might be a potential buyer.
Wow. We have time for one more. So I see a question here. How much did early customers impact the roadmap? And I know you touched on a little bit around going from 0 to 1 and 1 to infinity, but maybe elaborate a little bit more on how you balance the trade-offs.
Well, at a high level, I come from what I did mostly in Microsoft was be a product guy. John, who's our CTO, was like, I was more inbound product, he was more outbound product. Dima was also a new product a little bit. The honest truth is there are trade-offs. It's not like, it's common sense and some experience, right? So you have to get, there's no sentence or a bunch of words I can say that will solve it, but the challenge is, in other words, to go to talk to 10 different customers, get, 8 different requirements and 2 similar ones, and somehow build a product that 8 of them will deploy, and it's a single product. One of the key things that was like super important for us was that we're not going to build 2 we never maintain 2 versions. It's like one of the horrible sins that you can do early on, like just single product. But it's very hard to do. Like frankly, we had the unfair advantage because we had really strong product team. We didn't have ties, we didn't know this, we didn't do that. We had a very strong product team, so we knew how to do that part.
Awesome. Well, Ben, I cannot thank you enough for participating, and especially for just being so open. I know from the feedback we've gotten from the audience so far, they loved it. So thank you so much. I'm sure if the audience could stand up and clap right now, if we were all together in New York, they would. And
So just promise to invite me next time after the Corona. I'd
next
love to do it
time
in person.
would love to do it. So thank you again very much. Thank you everyone for joining. We'll be back in action. We're going to take the summer off, spare you all a little bit of Zoom action, and be back in September. In the meantime, you can join our Enterprise Weekly newsletter at workbench.com. It goes out every Friday. And we also have a guide with enterprise sales tips during COVID. Just go to our blog. And with that, thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.